Good afternoon. Welcome to the Denver Landmark Preservation webinar series. Today we are talking about Discover Denver, Denver's citywide building survey. My name is Jenny Buddenborg and I'm a senior city planner in the City and County of Denver's Community Planning and Development Department. I specifically work within the city's landmark preservation program, and I manage the city's role in this exciting multi-year project. Just a couple of quick logistical items before we jump in here. This webinar will be recorded and provided online. If you'd like to ask a question, please use the raise hand function or the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And I'll do my best to keep on top of that while I go through the presentation, and then we'll also have time at the end for questions too. So Discover Denver is a public-private partnership between the City and County of Denver and Historic Denver, Inc., the local nonprofit organization dedicated to historic preservation advocacy. With our combined resources, we are able to tackle this ambitious citywide building survey. Before we dig into the nuts and bolts of Discover Denver, I'd like to take a step back and make sure we're all on the same page as to what the citywide building survey is. Technically, it's a historic resources survey, an important element of historic preservation planning that provides a foundation for much of the work that we do at Denver Landmark Preservation. It is a critical first step to understand what historic resources exist that are historically, culturally, or architecturally significant to the history of our city, state, or nation. Gathering this baseline information allows us to then take next steps to recognize and protect that significant history, like through community awareness building, educational programming, and historic designation. You may have noticed that the tagline on the opening slide of this presentation said, "Know it, love it, one building at a time." That is the crux of Discover Denver, to identify the places that matter, communicate the value of those places, and nurture a culture of reinvestment in those places. These are the goals of this project and its partners that you see indicated at the bottom of the screen. And we're already seeing success, which I'll get to later in the presentation. The primary funders of Discover Denver are the Colorado State Historical Fund and City and County of Denver. Supplemental funds are provided by Historic Denver, and in the early planning stages of the project, the National Trust for Historic Preservation and National Park Service provided funding assistance. Like the construction of the Colorado National Bank in 1950 that you see pictured on the screen, this project takes a big lift and a lot of commitment to put into action. Because as you can see on this map, the project scope is quite large. Discover Denver is surveying every primary building in Denver, which currently equals roughly 161,000 buildings. Of those, 80% have never been surveyed. And the original construction dates of the majority of primary buildings makes them eligible for listing as Denver landmarks or in the National Register of Historic Places. To become a designated Denver landmark, a property must be at least 30 years old or of exceptional significance. And to be listed in the National Register of Historic Places, a property must be at least 30 years old or of exceptional importance. So this is a really big undertaking. Denver joins other major cities who have taken on similar efforts like Los Angeles. But because it is such an enormous lift, many cities don't have the resources to take on a similar project. This is why the partnership between the city and Historic Denver is so critical. One could not do it without the other. To give you a sense of the current number of locally designated properties in Denver, here are some numbers for you to chew on. Currently, there are 57 historic districts and 352 individual structures locally designated. That equals roughly 7,500 properties, or 4% of the city's total number of primary structures. In other words, 1 in 5 structures are designated as Denver landmarks, either individually or located within a historic district. A couple of recent designations over the past few years include the Henderson House, owned and designed by John Henderson, the first African-American licensed architect in Colorado. And most recently is the La Alma Lincoln Park Historic Cultural District, designated for its significance to Denver's Chicano history. The Denver Landmark Preservation Designation portfolio includes structures with a wide variety of uses, including residential, commercial, and institutional. And we are currently focused on expanding our designation portfolio to represent more underrepresented communities, which it currently lacks. Part of that effort includes the creation of a Latino Chicano historic context, which is currently underway, the content of which will be used by Discover Denver as a guide to survey significant historic places connected to Denver's Latino Chicano heritage. Because Discover Denver is such a large project, it is being phased over multiple years. The pilot kicked off in 2012, and over the past 9 years, we have completed 4 phases and are currently surveying in the Sunnyside neighborhood. Roughly 20,000 primary buildings have been surveyed through this effort to date. And as I mentioned earlier, the survey data has already led to successful results. For example, the top images of properties located along River Drive in the Jefferson Park neighborhood. The survey data gathered through Discover Denver in phase 1 allowed for a community-led effort with the support of the then councilman to designate the 1 block as the River Drive Historic District. Here's a map to help you better visualize the areas already surveyed by Discover Denver. Yellow indicates those areas completed by Discover Denver. Blue indicates our current survey area, which is Sunnyside. And then the project is not resurveying areas that are already locally designated, and that is what is indicated in red. So it's kind of a little bit of a bonus for our total numbers here for Discover Denver. You'll notice that there is a concentration in the central and northwest sections of Denver, and our current phase 4 will expand the project's geographic footprint by including neighborhoods in southwest and southeast Denver, like Westwood and Welsher. And phase 5, which is in the planning stages, will head to the southwest area of the city as well. So here are the criteria for neighborhood selection for each project phase. As I just mentioned, geographic diversity, ethnic cultural diversity, building type style diversity, rate of change. So in other words, how many alterations are we seeing to properties, demolitions, loss of historic character in a neighborhood? And then lastly, our neighborhood planning initiative, which is another multi-year project being undertaken by community planning and development. And this is to create neighborhood plans for every neighborhood in the city and county of Denver. And in order to help infuse necessary information to create priorities for historic preservation into that initiative and those plans, Discover Denver and the data that is gathered through the survey is being used to help inform those area plans. So that's a really important partnership project that we have ongoing right now. Once a phase is planned and funded, there are 3 major components that are part of the scope of work: field survey, research and building evaluation, and public engagement. The field survey and historic building research is conducted by professional staff and a dedicated pool of volunteers. For the field survey, handheld tablets are used that are preloaded with basic assessor's information onto a customized software platform. Staff and volunteers move from building to building, completing a predetermined set of data points. That data is then uploaded by staff and checked for accuracy. Properties that are believed to be eligible for designation as a Denver landmark or listing in the National Register are then assigned to a volunteer for in-depth historic building research. Staff then make a professional evaluation as to whether or not the property is potentially eligible for designation based on the field survey data, historical research, and information gathered from community members. While the on-the-ground survey and historical research are important pieces of determining the significance of a given property, so too is the information we gather through public engagement. At the beginning of each neighborhood survey, we hold a discovery day to learn about the neighborhood and its buildings from the community that knows them best. This helps us target certain properties for more extensive research and evaluation, and also helps inform the historic context of the area. For example, what events, persons, and other elements give meaning to it. For phase 5, we are planning to elevate this public engagement by also including what we're calling community navigators in each neighborhood who will help inform the project at a higher level. So what have we discovered to date through Discover Denver? I've got a couple interesting examples to share with you guys. Here's a property in City Park West that is a good representation of the Craftsman Bungalow, and that was owned by an African-American family at a time when real estate practices essentially forbid their purchase of the house due to discrimination within this neighborhood. So it was quite unusual for them to be able to purchase a home in this location at that time in the 1940s, 1950s. Another property is in the Capitol Hill neighborhood. This may be recognizable by many of you as it's a very prominent building on the corner of 12th and Logan. It is a unique example of a duplex in the classical revival style that was designed by Edwin Moorman, the same architect of the Fillmore Auditorium and the Mammoth skating rink and Tower of Jewels at Lakeside Amusement Park. And there are many more exciting finds like these that are shared on the Discover Denver Facebook page. The information gathered through Discover Denver is accessible to the public online. The project website currently has the best collection of that data and other resources, which you can find at discoverdenver.co. The city is currently working on a story map to provide an interactive map feature that will accompany the Discover Denver website. Even though the survey has a ways to go before it is complete, we are already using the data gathered to inform the work of the city and Historic Denver and others who may find the information useful. It is contributing to strategies implemented for the preservation and enhancement of historic resources, like greater public involvement through empowering community members to use the data to recognize and maintain the historic character of their neighborhoods through projects like Historic Denver Story Trek and Denver Landmark Designation. Knowing if a property is historically, architecturally, or culturally significant can also help prioritize its reuse instead of its potential loss through demolition, and target services to those places to help support historic preservation efforts. On a day-to-day basis, the city is using the survey data to guide demolition and design review projects, creation of plans for the city's neighborhood planning initiative, as I'd mentioned, and to prioritize preservation citywide plans like Blueprint Denver, which is the city's land use plan. Ultimately, the survey data allows us to better balance historic preservation in the city and county of Denver, an important effort given the rapid pace of new development in our neighborhoods. So you can engage in Discover Denver beyond attending this presentation today. We'd love to have you volunteer for the field survey or historic research, like the folks you see pictured here on the screen. You can also follow the project on social media at the project website or Facebook page. And when we come to your neighborhood, attend the Discovery Day to share the knowledge and stories of your community. And finally, access the data to learn more about the history and significance of buildings within your neighborhoods. Knowledge is power, as they say, and having that in hand will help lead to successful preservation efforts to maintain the historic character of our city. So that's a brief snapshot of Discover Denver, and I want to thank you guys for your time today, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.